Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, Red Laughlin here. We're on the Corner Bookstore today on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. I am honored today to have Alexandra Beaumont. She's a Pushcart Prize nominated fantasy and folklore author, and we'll be talking about her journey as an author, her books, and anything else in there that seems to make a lot of sense today. So with that, Alexandra, please join me.
Hello, lovely to be here. How are you doing?
Exceptionally well, as always. I think that accent kind of gives things away a little bit.
It does, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it's like I'm from Houston, Texas, and sometimes my accent gets in the way, but I kid my daughter all the time that her accent is pretty thick from Texas, and sometimes I say, would you say that again? I couldn't quite understand that with the accent. Anyway, what part of the United Kingdom are you from?
I'm from, well, I live in Bedfordshire at the moment, which is a countryside sort of filled county. I live in a tiny village called Silso, which has basically got a pub, and that's about it.
I can remember a few of those as I was traveling around Europe. You come driving by someplace and you go into town, and yeah, there's a little pub there, and maybe a gas station, maybe not, but the pubs seem to be very popular. Okay, yes. So let's start out. You've written a little bit, done a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So let's start way back when. When did you decide that you wanted to write a book?
So I've always been really into fantasy books, and sort of, as a child, I read a lot, as a lot of sort of fantasy authors do. So, but I'd always sort of written sort of short stories and that sort of thing. And then sort of in the COVID lockdown times, I was like, you know what? Well, I've got nothing else to do. I'm going to actually write a book. And I did. I had a wonderful time doing that. And I was lucky enough to get it published, which not everyone can say for their first novel. So I was very pleased about that, I have to say.
So you have a couple there, Dissidents of Birdsong and Testament of the Stars.
I do indeed.
So why don't we go ahead with Dissident of the Birdsong, not the Birdsong, but Dissidents. That's an interesting title. Let's start with the title.
Yeah, absolutely.
Folklore fantasy thing. Tell us about the title and how that fits into your book.
Yeah, sure thing. So this is Dissonance of Birdsong, and it's a folklore fantasy book set in ancient Cornwall. So for those of you who don't know, Cornwall is this really sort of harsh coastal community of the UK. It's all of it is sort of surrounded by the sea, basically. So Dissonance of Birdsong is about that. And so the title is very much about what the book is, sort of hinting at what the book is about, which is these enchanted birds who exhale mist from their lungs into the lungs of humans and help the humans survive the winter. And the main character, Ezeld, uses that mist and channels it into song in order to charm people to help her survive sort of difficult situations. So that's really what the title is hinting at, is the conflict and the bird song and the sacredness of the birds all at once together.
Is there folklore that goes along with this, with these birds?
So I built this folklore. I built this book on the sort of folklore of birds in Cornwall, which have their own sort of sacred stories, really. So there's this big belief that birds can sort of carry the souls of people. So there's a sort of this belief that when King Arthur died, he didn't die, but he reincarnated in a Cornish crow, a chough. And also, there's this belief that if a sailor dies, their soul gets carried on the seabirds, and so I really sort of took that and I thought, well, what can I do that sort of builds on that symbiosis between humans and birds? And so that's the sort of folklore that underpins this, really.
So you took the folklore, you developed characters, you put it into a setting, and you started writing. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so it tends to be what I'll do is I'll come up with an idea and then I'll write the first couple of chapters and I'll see if the characters chime, it works with the story and that sort of thing. And then once I've done that and I've decided, yeah, it does work, there's a story here, the characters are believable and interesting, then I'll plan the whole thing. So when I sit down and write, I can write knowing I've got the whole arc planned out.
Okay, so your basic modus operandi is you start writing and then you see how good it is and decide, okay, fine, this will work. And
Yeah,
that's
pretty
not,
much.
there's nothing wrong with that. Were you doing any kind of writing at all prior to that, prior to COVID?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got a degree in English literature and creative writing, so it is in my background. And I'd done quite a lot of poetry and sort of short stories before then, but none of them really sort of published, except one way back when I was like 5. But yeah, that Testament of the Stars was the first novel I wrote, and then sort of went from there, really.
Okay, so you started with a novel. That's
Mm.
that's a different kind of way to start. I mean, all of my stuff is nonfiction, but it's how-to kind of stuff, which is pretty easy for me. I have a book I started as a novel. It's been there for 10 years. I have everything lined out except the actual words that people say. It's all written, but I need to come up with a conversation. And that kind of put a stop. Well, actually, there's a lot of other reasons why it stopped, but regardless. I find that particular genre for me interesting. I love to read it, but to actually sit down and create the character, his mindset, her mindset, and start putting action and places and time and the way people talk and everything else. I know
Takes a
mine
lot
very
longer.
well, and I guess you with the English literature background and the creative writing, you probably that wasn't as difficult as it would be for most people.
It certainly helped. I would definitely recommend people watching as well, in terms of a way to get those sort of dialogues and those character motivations fleshed out. That sort of is a really useful way of doing that, I think. So, but yeah, the degree did help, but isn't everything. You don't have to have a degree to be a novelist, of course.
Uh, so for pleasure reading, you read things that you like, what you write, or do you read novels? Do you read what kind of things do you enjoy reading?
I've got quite a broad taste. I mostly read fantasy. I do read the occasional sort of historical fiction or just sort of general fiction, really. One of my favorite books is The Shadow of the Wind by the Spanish author Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And that's not really fantasy, but it's got sort of gothic and fantastical elements to it. It's more of a mystery, I'd say. So yeah, I've got quite a broad range, but generally I gravitate towards folklore and fantasy inspired books.
Okay, so you sat down, you started writing, and
Mhm.
first few chapters look pretty good, and you say, okay, I'm going to continue. Was there somebody there to help you, help read, give you some direction, somebody to talk back and forth to?
Yeah, so I have some wonderful friends who read a lot of fantasy. So I sort of tested both of my early books with them and sort of got them to, or asked them to read them, and they were very gracious in doing so and passing me feedback. So that's been very good. I'm also very lucky, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, that my husband is a professional editor. So from that perspective, he has helped me quite a lot. So I will plug him, Paul Martin Editorial. You can find him on the CIEP, which is a editorial platform. I definitely recommend him. He helped me get my books done.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question because it came up last week talking to an
Mm.
author, and her husband was one of the characters in the book. You know, obviously by a different name, but Has that ever occurred to you that your husband might become a character in a book?
Would I admit it if I had done that? Possibly not. But no, maybe. I think you borrow elements from people you know in life anyway. So yeah, I suspect there's aspects of different people I know wrapped into the characters, but never have I faithfully said that one person is that person.
Okay. So there's no threats out there that I'm going to create a character with your name and you're going to be killed in the first chapter.
No, no.
Uh, so editing is always a bugaboo for most of us that who write. Tell us about your editing journey. What happened? Where did you get to, and what kind of success and failures did you find along the way?
So I think one of the main things I learned between editing Testament of the Stars as my debut and then Dissonance of Birdsong as the sort of next book that I wrote after that is I realized that when I was doing Testament, I had quite a lot of things that I needed to go back and fix from a sort of consistency perspective. And that was despite having planned out the whole of the story. And I think that kind of happened because my ideas had sort of developed as I was writing, and then so early concepts that I'd written then sort of needed to change to match the ideas as I'd sort of further developed them as I was writing, which I guess is inevitable when you're writing a book for the first time as well. You don't quite sort of have the full sense of how to plan one if you've never done it before, because it's completely unique. Um, so yeah, I think what I learned between sort of book one and book two, like they're not in the same series to be clear, but between the first and second books I wrote, um, was sort of have those character arcs very defined early on in the book writing process, which I did a bit more with Dissonance of Birdsong because I learned how much pain I had to go through when editing Testament. um, but yeah, so I think having that and that made editing Dissonance of Birdsong much easier. I was also very grateful to have a defined publication process through my publisher to help me edit as well.
Okay, so you have a character, you introduce
Mhm.
that character. Do you have a picture or something that you use to kind of get you in the mindset of when you're using that character's voice? Uh, how do you separate your characters when your mind when you're writing the dialogue?
As in from between one character to the other.
Correct.
So I think I try and have a very clear idea of the type of person that I'm writing. For instance, in Distance of Birdsong, Ezelda's quite sort of practical. She is a bit no nonsense. She's very direct at some places, and she's quite forthright about what she wants. Her sister Nessa, who is a very key sort of character in the book as well, is a bit sort of softer, is warmer, even though she's the warrior of the two of them. She's kind of quite a bit sort of like brighter and more compassionate in terms of her demeanor. And that just helped sort of set the relationship that I wrote between the two of them. So yeah, I think I sort of have buzzwords that I associate with them, and I always have a Pinterest board and a playlist that sort of connects for the different characters as well. So that helps me sort of visualize them in some sort of way as well.
So you have the Pinterest board, and that
Mm,
keeps you aligned with your character, which is super important because you don't want to be changing them in the middle of the stream. But uh,
yeah.
is that a lesson learned that you did as an author? Did you didn't start out with the Pinterest board, or did you?
I did Pinterest boards for both of the books. It's definitely helped me. I think the main things are like decide what eye color they have, what's their physique, how do they walk, what's their hair like, what weapon do they fight with, that kind of thing. Because there was a few things where when I was doing sort of the first edits for Testament of the Stars, where like in one scene they'd have a sword, and then in the next scene they'd have a dagger and things like that. Really easy things to creep in, but if you know categorically up front, like that character uses a dagger, then there's no way you're going to get that wrong. So yeah, I think there's quite sort of I sort of make a character profile that has all that stuff in it before writing.
Okay, so you have the character development, which is critical. You have
Mm,
the vocabulary, or whatever you want to call his cultural way of talking. I
Yeah.
assume a lot of this folklore fantasy, because it's back a ways in time, you have to have not the current English vernacular, that you're actually using some of the verbiage from way back when.
So this is quite an interesting one. Oh, sorry, were you still saying something? It paused. It lagged over there. No,
I'm
we're all
sorry.
good. Okay, I think there's a bit of a delay on the line. Um, yeah, in answer to your question, there's quite an interesting school of thought on the language of sort of modern books, because even though you are writing in a sort of historical setting, you're still very much writing for a modern audience. So it's not very sort of the done thing to write completely archaically. So I think you just kind of want little notes and nudges and hints towards it without sort of writing in Shakespearean English or ancient world texts or text and that sort of thing. So yeah, you kind of want you hint at it without sort of going right down that rabbit hole.
Okay, so I can have instruments, weapons, clothing with old time names, archaic names, so to
Yeah,
speak.
that kind of thing.
And I'm not really talking that, but it's part of the description of what's going on at that time. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because that was one of the questions I had when I have something that took place 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. You know, most of the books I read are, as you say, in modern English for the reader to
Yeah.
understand. But they have certain things occasionally that they come, okay, what is that? And I got to go look it up, or wait and see if it's explained 2 or 3 pages later, which most of the time they do. So, um, you wrote your first book. Let's go ahead and take a look here at the second one, Testament of the Stars. Tell us a little bit about that one. How did that one start, and why did you shift from Testament of the Stars to the birds?
So Testament of the Stars began when I had this idea basically where I wanted to take this idea that was very prevalent in the Tudor times, where they believed that the star you were born under, the star sign you were born under, would set the path and the fate of your life. And I thought, that's interesting. Wonder what that would be like if it was a religious system. So I created a fantasy world where there were these three sort of contested settlements basically that all had their own stars and were star rocks that had sort of fallen within their settlements, and they all worshipped them in slightly different ways. And that was a really interesting sort of story for me. I really enjoyed writing it. When I had basically then another idea, which was the birds idea. And I thought, I really need to just get that down and do that while I'm passionate about it. And so, yeah, I sort of running two series alongside each other, but I'm just finishing the sequel to Testament of the Stars now. So that's going to be a duology. And then that will be finished. And then I'm just going to go back and live in the birds world forever.
Forever, huh?
Forever until I get another idea, right?
Forever until another idea pops up. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so
That's all for
the
life.
stars, is the location of that nearby the birdsong?
The is in where it's set.
Yeah.
So I don't live near Cornwall now. My mum grew up in Cornwall, and so I sort of grew up on learning a lot of the folklore stories that she grew up with, and so she told me a lot of those. So it was kind of quite special to my heart for that reason. But no, I sadly do not live on the coastal cliffs of Cornwall.
The reason I was asking is sometimes people go to a particular place, vacation, or it doesn't
Mm.
matter what it is, and that, okay, I would love to have a book written with this locale. And so I was just kind of wondering, is there a part of England that you visited, or Wales, or wherever it may happen to be, that you can say, perfect setting for what I want, and then everything kind of developed out of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been to Cornwall a lot, obviously. Like my mum took me back there a lot to sort of show me the places that she loved and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely in there, but I think the sort of drive to write something set in Cornwall came from like my love of the stories and the background to it, really.
Um, how much time occurred between finishing one book and starting the next?
About a year, I think, maybe between 6 months and a year.
That's
Sort
pretty
of
fast.
COVID time was so vague that I can't even tell you how many months passed within it. So, but yeah, I write quite quickly when I get going. So,
Okay, so you're writing, you have this boom, 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 everything's falling in. When do
mm.
you start telling the world that you have a book coming out?
um, with these two, I only told people once I'd got publisher buy-in for it, because until then I wasn't even sure that it was going to happen. I started this as a kind of like, just see what happens, do it for a bit of fun. Not sure if it's going to definitely get anywhere, but I'll try. So let's see. And then it happened. And then I sort of had about 6 months where I was like, nah, it's not happening. I don't believe it. This can't be happening. And then it was. So yeah, I very much waited until it was all agreed with the publisher, and then I could stop pinching myself and convincing myself that it was true.
Okay, so your marketing campaign kind of lagged a little bit to say you got the book published and then, hey world, here I am.
Oh no, once I had the publishing contract agreed, there's like about sort of 18 months sort of gap between between signing the contract and when it publishes. So yeah, I had like 18 months to then hype it. So that was fine.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the hyping. What did you do? What seemed to work? What would you not do again?
So obviously, like, a lot of hype is done on social media these days. So when I was starting to write, I set up an X account, Twitter as it was then, um, and that was really helpful to sort of connect with people. In fact, that was how I found my publisher, to be honest, which is Bridget Press. It's an American publisher, and they were on there sort of doing like what's called Twitter pitch events. So basically authors will tweet like a little bit of information about their book, and then on specific days, and then publishers will click like, and if they like it, then you query them and send them the full manuscript eventually. And that's how I connected with Bridget Escape. So yeah, that's quite lucky. But what I do a lot of is I tweet about folklore, or on Instagram as well. I post about folklore every day. And that just sort of generates interest connected to the kind of things that I'm writing about as well. So you sort of find people through sort of the wider interest, basically, and then hope they come and find you and like your books as well.
So for fantasy folklore, what social media platform do you think worked out best for you?
I have my largest following on X or Twitter. So that's quite good from that perspective, because there's a big folklore community there. I'm starting to build up on Instagram as well, just because now like I've got a bit more visual content, and starting to post more folklore on there, and I've finally learned about brands, maybe, who knows. But yeah, I'm growing my following on Instagram as well, and I think my social tag is there, which you can find me on X through that, but also on Instagram through that same tag as well.
Okay, did you explore using a publicist or anything, or just everything resided with the publisher?
So my publisher very lovely sort of has appointed a publicist, which I found very helpful, because that sort of gives me access to interviews and sort of opportunities like this one that I wouldn't otherwise find. And yeah, I think that's been really valuable, actually.
Okay, so your publicist is getting your real face out in front of the crowd. And then when you're in front of the crowd, then you're holding up your books and saying, this is whatever. So the covers, they're kind of unique. Once you hold up that one there that we did just a moment ago.
Here it is.
Yeah, that is, how did you decide that was the cover you wanted? Because it's, you have a dark-haired girl looking out, and birds in the background, birds in the foreground, colors black, yellow, blue. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with the cover design on that particular book.
Yeah, so I I always used to think that I didn't particularly love covers with the character on the front, but for this one, I thought actually I'm going to try that, and because I really wanted sort of her basically. The closer I get it, you can see basically she's intently staring out to the sea, and this is quite an important part of Ezeld's character. She's quite wild. She's desperate to go to the sea. It calls to her, and I wanted to sort of convey that on the cover really. And then I couldn't not have the birds with all of the sort of the opening scene of the book, which is not too much of a spoiler to give away. Basically, these birds flock into the cliffs and it's chaos and it's noisy and it's vibrant. And I wanted the cover to sort of convey that. And then sort of as we come down the cover, because there's everything has meaning on here, this was done by a illustration house called Carry On House, and it's very perfect for it, to be honest. And then there's a sort of element of there being mystery and mysterious creatures at sea. So then you've got these eyes looming in the waves. So it really
Oh,
starts to tell like the story of what's going on there.
I didn't notice the eyes before. That's kind of neat and eerie in a way.
Yeah, that was always the idea. I kind of hope that what people will do is they'll read the book, then they'll understand why the eyes are there, and then they'll look back at the cover and go, ah, that's why there's eyes.
Are you a beach girl or are you a sailor? What's your connection with the sea?
So my family are big into sailing. A lot of my family live near the sea, so again, like I've spent a lot of time at like family homes at the sea, growing up and things like that. Um, yeah, and again, going back to Cornwall with my mum. So yeah, it's just always been part of my life. I don't really live close to the sea, sadly, because of uh, life being what it is. You don't always get to be close to the sea in the UK, even though we're an island nation. Um, but yeah, I've spent so much of my time around it that like the folklore to me is very special.
Yeah, I love beaches. I love it, but it has to have something that most, yeah, coconut trees, warm water. Yeah, yeah. If the temperature of
Absolutely.
the water is much below about 20, I guess in your particular case, 26, 27 degrees. Uh, I like warm water in the ocean anyway, but
Fair.
that's another side. But anyway, but the water around England can get kind of chilly at times. So even if you're prepared for it, getting in that boat and sailing, it's a challenge. I mean, uh, even though you can look out at it from the beach, being in that environment is not quite the same thing as staring at it and visualizing something beautiful and whatever. Uh,
Hmm.
so when you have these eerie creatures in the sea, do they have names, or are they just a creature, or what?
So they do have names. We are getting into like the realms of what you should discover in the book, but what I will
Okay,
say is there's a quite sort of rich merfolk tradition in sort of Cornish folklore as well. Um, and so particularly what I've done here is used quite a lot of, sort of Cornish language, and there's a phrase morvaran basically, which is sort of sea folksy creatures in some of Cornish folklore. So that's sort of what I've sort of tried to tap into is some of the sort of stories about the Morvaran in Cornish folklore and sort of weaved that in somewhere. But I won't say any more because the more I say, the more it possibly spoils things.
but who would be an ideal reader for your book? Who are you writing the book for?
So this book really is young adult fantasy, but it's got a very it's crossover, and so it's received a lot of praise and love from adults as well. And it's a book for anyone who's trying to find themselves. Readers find from it a sort of journey about discovery. Self-discovery is a really key part of Ezeld's story. It's finding where you belong as well, and it's overcoming adversity to find out who you are and who you want to be. And that's come from a position of sort of facing chronic illness, which is something that I was going through at the time where I wrote this. I was diagnosed with chronic sinusitis. And so Ezeld sort of has some of the similar elements of that. And so this really is a story for not just people with chronic illness, obviously, but anyone who feels that they are struggling but fighting to overcome the difficulties they're facing will find quite a resonating, poignant story in this book as well.
Is there a paragraph or two that you would like to read to the audience?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to get it open. I'll read the opening because I think that's the bit that sort of brings across some of the stuff I was just talking about most. I snarled in the smoke-laced darkness of our roundhouse, snorting blood into the embers of last night's fire. The rot in my lungs had returned. Each breath seared my windpipe until every gasp felt like a bee stinging my throat. Spring. It was almost here now, and the mist breath in my lungs was dwindling. I only had dregs left. My sister, Nessa, had almost depleted hers, lighting the healing fire I now sat beside. The sweet pine smoke soothed me a little, but it wasn't enough. I had to leave. Waves laced with the cries of birds broke against the peninsula outside, singing to me of freedom. Sneak to the salt water before it's too late. Blood dribbled from my nose, but excitement thrummed, beat through me like a drum. It was time.
Okay, why don't we give equal treatment to your testament book? Is there a little section in there that you would like to read, or do you have access to that easily?
I do. I can just go grab it off the shelf if that's okay.
We'll pretend like you're still here.
I should have planned for that. I'm sorry.
I should have told you about that when we were backstage, and that's my fault. I take blame for that.
It's all good. Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Go for it.
Time crept by for Anya Arden, locked in the astrologer's cave for 30 days in preparation for this moment, left blindfolded so that she would learn to feel the fallen stars without seeing them. They were so close, they felt like her own shadow, but she didn't feel ready to join the settlement star worshipping cult. Initiates, your day has come. Astrologers, enter. Anya flinched a little as the clear voice rang out, breaking the long silence. Sounds of shuffling leather shoes echoed through the cavern as the established astrologers sidled in. She twitched as bodies bustled by, knocking against her where she knelt. Soft hands brushed her cheeks before tugging away the blindfold. She couldn't make out the face of the person who'd done it, as cracks of sunshine splintered around the gap in the door that led into the cave, blurring her vision in the sudden light. Shadows of shape slowly emerged, her vision settling. What now? Slowly she stumbled to her feet and tried to slow her breaths, watching over the other initiatives clustering together.
Okay, so your books are available on paperback and ebook, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. You can find them on Amazon. You can get them on Barnes & Noble, various other places as well. You can get them also in the UK through Waterstones for Dissonance of Birdsong. And yeah, you're seeing it now on the screen. Lovely covers next to each other, hopefully. Yeah, and I'd love to hear what you think as well. I'd love to have some reviews and see what you liked most about the different books.
Okay, I noticed that the cover of the Testament book is there has to be a story behind what you have. I assume that inside that book, the representation of the two facial expressions are part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So Testament follows three characters. It's a very different writing style to Dissonance, where it's close in first person with Ezeld. Testament is third person. It follows the two people on the cover. One is Anya Arden, who you were introduced to in the extract I just read, and she's a aspirant astrologer who's worked really hard to get that, because when she becomes an astrologer, she wins the right to marry who she likes, and that's Tolska, the person underneath. So is Anya on top and Tolska underneath, and this is, in a very literal sense, a star-crossed lovers story. So it's quite sort of Shakespearean, and it's sort of a Romeo and Juliet vibe to it. And basically, as you sort of get into the book, you find out that there's politics and betrayal afoot, which make the story between the two of them more complicated.
Okay, so a little drama mixed in with everything else.
Love a bit of drama.
Okay, so we're getting toward the end of the show today. You say you have a sequel coming out now on Dissidence, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm
No, on Testament.
On Testament and Dissonance as well. I'm working on both of those. Yeah, I don't have dates confirmed with my publisher yet on those, but yeah, they're both in progress. The Testament one is almost finished, which is going to be a novella to just follow up and round off that story, and then following that, I'm going to hopefully write a full-length fantasy novel following on from Dissonance of Birdsong.
Okay, so we can find your books on Amazon here in the States. We can find your books on Amazon in the UK. We can find them on your website. Any other places that you want to point out that your books are available?
You can also, if you would like them signed, it takes a while because basically they have to go to this book provider called The Broken Spine. But if you want one signed directly, they have a load of signed book plates by me, so that's one other way. Also, I'm at three UK events coming up actually. 28th of September, I'm going to be at what's called the Innsmouth Literary Festival, which is going to be very exciting. So I have books there, and that's in Bedford. I will also be at a shop called Lucky Hair Books, which is in a nearby village to me, which is a lovely little shop. It's really cute. And then I'm going to be at a really big bookshop in November called Waterstones, which is the Waterstones in Covent Garden. So if you're UK or London based, definitely come find me there, because I'll be with a group of other authors who also write folklore fantasy.
Okay, so we're literally at the end of the show today. Alexandra, I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope that people did also. If you're into folklore and fantasy, great books. And please, if you got a question for her, ask her. If you got a review, write it. We're all part of that community, that we're here to support each other. So please take advantage of it and do what you can. So Alexandra, I look forward to our next meeting. I'm sure it's going to happen. And with that,
I love it. Thank you.
I'm going to give you the last 2 or 3 words. Anything you want to say to the audience?
I just say I absolutely love talking about folklore, so please reach out to me. Tell me about your favorite folklore. I will always chat until the cows come home about that. I look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thanks again, Alexandra Beaumont, and again, folklore fantasy author in England. And that concludes our corner bookstore for today. In about 20 minutes, I will be on The Wise Ones. And we have a dog expert, something that we don't typically have on the show, but he wrote a book that is a novel-like book, but it could even be a business book with regard to the lessons learned on transformation and life issues. So please join me there on The Wise Ones. And immediately after that, I'm starting a new program on Talking Heads, an hour and 20 minutes from now, that we're looking at how can you establish good habits for your health for 2025 starting today. Gives us plenty of time to talk about our mindset, and that's what we're talking about today primarily, is let's get our mindset to begin with and then start some of the things that we need to do. So with that, I bid you adieu, and we will catch you later on. Take care. Bye now.
We face daily cyber risks, spending over 7 hours of screen time, including 4.5 hours on mobile phones. This convenience comes with significant dangers, with cybercrime costs predicted to exceed $10.5 trillion by 2025. In 2023 alone, seniors lost over $3.4 billion to cybercrime. Our goal is to make social engineering concepts of cybersecurity easier to understand. We work with business teams, senior living facilities, investment companies, and educational institutions, both individually and in groups. We offer real-life examples to help you recognize and prevent attacks, with sessions available both in person, in selected regions, and remotely. Schedule your training session, or to learn more, contact us today. Call us at 847-845-9360. Email us at info@cybersecurityeasy.com. Protect your team and family with cybersecurityeasy.com.
My name is Dr. Felix Kravitz, and I am the founder of cybersecurityeasy.com, LLC. We live in a world full of vulnerabilities and cyber risks. We spend almost 4.5 hours a day on our mobile phones. It's over 7 hours of screen time daily when including computer use. We often forget that this convenience comes with risks. Published data predicts that the cost of cybercrime will exceed $10.5 trillion in 2025. These numbers encompass not only businesses, but also each one of us, including our children and our parents. In 2023, the FBI reported over $3.4 billion lost by seniors aged 60 and older. Cybersecurityeasy.com LLC's initiative is to massively support the community by providing cyber safety coaching and improving social engineering awareness. Our goal is to make social engineering concepts of cybersecurity easier to understand. We work with business teams, seniors, and educational institutions, both individually and in groups. We cover various topics, from phone phishing attacks to AI-generated voice cloning, robocalls, password protection, and more, using life examples. Talk to us today. Call us at 847-845-9360 or email us at info@cybersecurityeasy.com.
Hello, I'm children's author Diane Floyd Bain, and I am co-host for several of the USA Global TV and radio shows. I joined because of the purpose of the USA Global TV and radio. They provide content for the viewers and listeners, an opportunity for people around the world to have their own show or even be a guest on an existing show. We truly believe in helping others get their positive message out to the world. We also have the opportunity for the listeners. You can watch on several platforms, and on YouTube, you can ask questions and even give a comment. We absolutely love it. I love being part of the USA Global TV and radio because I love positive messages. And who doesn't? And we need more of that in the world. We are a family, and we hope you will join us and become part of the family too.